Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms. Have you noticed that interest rates are trending in a certain direction? Yeah, way up, which obviously affects the affordability of real estate across the board. So what do higher interest rates mean for the real estate market now and long term? The answer may not be what you think. Today on the Real Estate Guys radio program.
If you love real estate and have always wanted to own your own business, listen up. The Real Estate Guys and their panel of experts want to teach you how to go full-time fast in the real estate syndication business. These next few years may go down in history as one of the best times ever to acquire investment real estate. There are deals everywhere if you know where to look and how to assemble the resources. The Secrets of Successful Syndication seminar will show you how to make big money doing big deals from a team of experts that have syndicated projects totaling more than $1 billion. Don't wait for someone to give you a raise or create a job for you. Attend the Secrets of Successful Syndication and learn how to build a team, raise capital, find deals, and make full-time money in 6 months or less. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events. All the big players use syndication as a way to diversify risk, optimize profits, and earn big money. You can too. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click on events.
Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio show. I'm your host, Robert Helms. Joining me, as he normally does, it's our co-host, financial strategist, Russell Gray. Hey, Robert. Just back from the 48th Annual New Orleans Investment Conference. Saw lots of listeners there. Saw lots of our big brain friends there. And we saw more charts and graphs than you can shake a stick at.
I even contributed some of those. You know, we were obviously talking about all things economic. As real estate investors, the reason we started attending that conference so many years ago was because we realized that our Main Street investments floated in a macroeconomic sea that largely we didn't understand. And those macro factors rolled downhill big time through the great financial crisis when mortgage-backed securities started a global contagion, and balance sheets of these major financial institutions, most of whom you'd think didn't have anything to do with real estate, all of a sudden started causing the mortgage lenders to go out of business. And when the air came out of the jump house, we call it, in other words, you could not get mortgages anymore, equity disappeared, people were upside down, mortgage brokerages like mine were failing left and right. And there was just a lot of bloodletting on Main Street. So, of course, we made it our business to pay attention to these things for the last dozen years. And one of the places we've been able to go to find a lot of great information, of all places, is the New Orleans Investment Conference, which is largely a resource and precious metals conference.
Well, it sure is. And one of the great things about precious metals and other resources is they're hard assets, real things, tangible stuff you can touch. Real estate falls into that category. And so for the last many years, we've been adding little by little more real estate content, and it's been awesome. But I was remarking to the group of our mentoring club that, you know, it seems like if this were just about metals and mining, we probably wouldn't attend every year. We'd probably attend every 5 or 6 years. We're interested in that stuff, but it wouldn't be center mass. But Brian London, the promoter, does such a good job of bringing folks with a larger picture and history of studying the macro, not just as it applies to oil and gas and silver and gold, but all across the board. James Grant, who's written Grant's Interest Rate Observer for the last 40 plus years, he has a thing or two to say about interest rates. Danielle DiMartino Booth joined us at the summit this year. She spent 9 years at the Federal Reserve. She understands a thing or two. George Gammon was there. Jim Stack was there. Robert Prechter was there. Unbelievable folks who are understanding where we are in this unique time. And we also got to meet a bunch of new people, but it was kind of old home week. And one of the big things throughout the conference is just inflation and interest rates. And so we thought today we'd address the elephant in the room, which is what's going to happen to real estate if interest rates stay at 7% or go up from here. And then what about inflation? And so those are big topics, but I think what we'll do in this show is bring it down to the street level, because that's where we live, is with real folks who get up every day and put together their real estate portfolios over time. Many of you are part-time real estate investors. Some of you are full-time real estate investors, but most of us use leverage. We don't buy a property for cash. Well, occasionally we might, but for the most part, we love leverage. It magnifies returns. It gives us tax deductibility, does lots of cool stuff. And yet, in the last few months, mortgage rates have gone up like crazy. Now, this isn't fair, but I will say that I stumbled across a podcast from 2 years ago with a mortgage lender that we've known a long time saying, hey, it's not so bad. Rates are going to go back down. And by the middle of 2022, rates should be low. All right, well, you can't expect anyone to predict the future. But as I listened to her, she wasn't saying anything really about the credit markets, about the Federal Reserve, about macroeconomic factors, about inflation, where it might go. And she certainly wasn't talking back then about supply chain disruption or any of this. It was after the pandemic, so she at least had that part right. But, the thing is, this is always changing. We're here near the end of 2022. A lot of people like to go back into our archives and hear our old shows. Who knows how this is going to weather in the light of day? But right now, things have changed drastically. This is the biggest change, and we saw this chart time and time again this last weekend, the biggest change in interest rates we've seen for a long, long time.
Well, and not only is it a big change numerically in terms of a percentage of where it was to where it is, because remember, if interest rates go from 3 to 6, you think, oh, that's only a 3% increase. No, you just doubled the cost of your debt service. And so it's significant. And the fact that it's happened so fast means the market hasn't had time to adjust to it. This is a sledgehammer that the Federal Reserve is taking to what they perceive to be red hot, burning, out of control inflation. The same inflation just not too long ago they were saying was transitory. And so it takes a little bit of study and analysis to understand really kind of what they mean by inflation and what inflation is. But just think of it in terms of real estate and components of cost. Obviously, we care about interest rates because when we put together a capital stack, a big chunk of the capital is the loan. You make a 20 or 25 or 30% down payment, and 60, 70, 80% is debt. And the debt service on that is determined by the interest rate. And so interest rates are very important to your bottom line cash flow. Now, interest rates are derived from supply and demand in bond markets, and bond markets are typically denominated in dollars. And so you need to care about what's going on with the currency. You need to care about what's going on in the bond markets. That's where this heady macro stuff kind of factors in. But then when you go to the street level and look at prices of anything, there's components of cost. And those components of cost are the interest rates on the capital it takes to build something, to finance inventory, all of the cost of capital for anybody that uses leverage, and almost everybody does. And so that's a component of cost. Taxes is another component of cost. You have to account for in your business model the price you're going to pay for taxes. Another component of cost is regulation. The more time and effort you have to spend complying with various regulations costs you money, increases your overhead, increases your cost to do, and ultimately increases your cost. And then the biggie is energy. If your energy costs are up, as Chris Martenson has told us many times, energy is the economy and the economy is energy. It takes energy to conduct economic activity. When the cost of energy goes up, it adds that component of cost and some friction. So if you look at what's gone on in the last several years, we have had energy policy, which has constricted the amount of energy available, which has increased the cost. We've had a tax policy, which has increased the burden of tax, not decreased it. We've had a regulatory policy, which has increased the burden of regulation, not decreased it. And then to pour gasoline on that fire, the Federal Reserve has added higher interest rates and increased the cost of capital. So all of these things are happening at the same time, and they're happening very, very quickly. As an investor, it just means when this type of intense event occurs, you've got to be able to read and react just that much faster. And that's why it's so important that you begin to pay attention and why we cover these topics on this show. Because again, you go back to us in 2008, we were like probably a lot of people out there. We'd never seen a major bear market in real estate. Real estate prices had never dropped 20, 30, 40%. We'd never seen that. We'd never seen a complete collapse of credit markets. I'd never seen that. It was not factored into any of my thoughts. I didn't even understand how to see the warning signs when they were manifest. And I couldn't understand what guys like Robert Kiyosaki Kiyosaki were trying to tell me, because I was too busy defending what I wanted to believe instead of looking at what was really happening. So big note to self, right? Hang out with smarter people, study things you don't understand, because there's a reason all these really smart and wealthy people pay attention to them. These fund managers, guys managing billions of dollars, are paying attention to these things. And, whether your portfolio is big or large, all of these things affect you. And you're certainly, as a Main Street investor, not insulated from it. We are all feeling it at the gas pump. We're feeling it in the supply chain, cost of lumber, cost of materials. We're feeling it, obviously, with the availability of credit. And one of the big things that we need to pay attention to is not just what interest rates are, but the health of the credit markets, which is a whole different discussion.
So what does all that mean for real estate investors? Is it time to sell and get out? Is it time to double down and buy more? Is it time to put our head in the sand and wait? That's what we're going to talk about today. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Live nationwide, you're listening to the Real Estate Guys. Find out more at realestateguysradio.com.
In uncertain times like this, it's great to know there are two things you can always count on: high demand for affordable single-family homes to live in, and Terry Kerr's amazing Memphis team at Mid-South Home Buyers to find, fix, and manage the next addition to your recession-resistant real estate portfolio. The Memphis market is logistics and distribution dynamo with an economic engine that's essential to moving goods and critical supplies all over the United States. Quality rehab, proven profitable property management, affordable rents, and solid ROI make turnkey property investing through Terry's team a dream when it matters most. To learn more about Memphis and Mid-South Home Buyers, send an email to midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. That's midsouth@realestateguysradio.com. If you've been listening to the Real Estate Guys for a while, then you've heard about the legendary Investors Summit. Simply put, it's the highest level event we do, and the content, faculty, and attendees are amazing. If you're serious about taking your real estate investing to the next level, then join us next summer. You'll spend an entire week with like-minded investors, world-class educators, and real-world professionals, and you'll have a blast. It all begins June 6, 2023 in Ambergris Caye, Belize. Visit realestateguysradio.com and click on the tab that says Summit to learn more and reserve your spot. We'll spend a sun-drenched week learning and networking with more than 25 class sessions and breakouts, plus small format roundtable discussions, great dinner conversations, and a ton of fun. It's nearly 70% full already, but there's room for you if you go to realestateguysradio.com and click Summit and make plans to spend a week with the Real Estate Guys and an all-star faculty on the 21st Annual Investors Summit on Sand.
Hi, this is Mauricio Raul, the founder and CEO of Mir Law Group, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program, heard every weekend on this fine radio station, all the time at realestateguysradio.com and your favorite podcast outlets. What the heck is going on? Interest rates are high, and that means that houses are less affordable, and that means people aren't buying as many. We're seeing a slowdown across the board. 6 months ago, I remember being at a conference, and I asked people to raise their hand if their property in their primary market had gone up in value in the last 12 months, and every single hand went up. That would not be the same result today, although we do want to talk about the difference between inflation, deflation, and disinflation. George Gammon hit that really hard this weekend. And when we think about it in terms of real estate prices, not in terms of the macro picture, but a lot of what's happening, a lot of the news about real estate markets is that number of sales are decreasing. And I would say that's true in most places. The number of sales are decreasing. The number of multiple offers are less. Now, that's separate from the price. They can be interrelated, as we'll discuss, but the number of sales is different. Sometimes when you look at a chart and you see something like the number of sales in the area and you see it going down, that chart is absolutely headed down. And yet in some of those markets, the price is not going down. The price is going up slower.
So I think when George is talking about inflation, deflation, or disinflation, the nuance I think we all understand is that deflation is prices going down. And you can have deflation in asset prices, as we're currently experiencing in the stock market, in the bond market, in the real estate market. Well, you have an increase in prices in the things that you need to have. This is one of the big concerns, right? The things that you need to live on, energy, food, shelter, those are going up. But at the same time, your assets or your balance sheet is going down. And the difference between real wages and nominal wages are going up nominally by the number, but the cost of living is going up faster. So if you're making $100,000 a year and you get a 5% increase and your income goes to $105,000 a year, that seems great till you realize that your expenses have gone up by 10 or 20%. So that extra $5,000 is actually like a negative 2 or 3 or whatever the number is in your actual purchasing power. So negative real wages is got an impact on household budgets and their ability to lever their income into housing. Higher interest rates is having an impact on how big a payment people can afford. And so the people on the lower end of the demographic or the food chain, if you will, are falling off the bus and they're not able to buy. Of course, that means they're going to need to rent. And you're seeing some of that. The rents are a little bit more sticky than the housing prices. And I showed some charts at the New Orleans Investment Conference. That's typically, historically been the case when people's need for housing doesn't go away just because they can't afford to buy. And of course, people will move also.
Well, in fact, that's a chart, Russ, that you show a lot in presentations. If we look at what happened to housing prices during the great financial crisis, obviously, after 2008 into 2009, house prices went down. But when you look at that same period and you look at the amount of rent paid, across the board, rent went down nowhere near as sharply as housing prices. In many places, it didn't go down at all. And so that's the big difference, is that rent is one of those things because it's not voluntary. I mean, I guess you could live under a bridge, but you can't sit out the housing market. And to your point, if people can't afford to buy a house, they might rent one. And so the rent is more sticky. It doesn't react up and down as quickly as price can when things like interest rate and component costs change.
Yes, it's very, very sticky because if you consider that most rents are derived from leases that could be 6 months, 1 year, so that's pretty stable. It's not going to react to something going on in the economy as quickly as, say, housing prices are, and housing prices aren't going to react as quickly as, say, something like stocks. So that's just how quickly does the asset react. So the income is very, very stable. The other thing is housing prices are derived from comparatives, comparables. So if you do an analysis of a property and appraisal, and you know this better than me, Robert, because you taught it for 4 years, but basically, you do a 1 mile radius around the subject property and you find every property similar to that sold in the last 6 months, and those are your comps. And of course, in the rearview mirror, those comps may be a little bit high, but as soon as one sells cheap, it draws down the price of every single one. Well, if one rental unit in a marketplace rents for less money than it did before, so it starts to feel a softening of rent, the same mechanism to kind of reset by comparison all the other rents is not as visible. It just doesn't react as quickly. It's not like there's some service that you go out there. It's going to be the market. People are going to go shop around looking for a place to live, and they're going to recognize it. And after, this is not worth it, and they'll begin to withdraw their bid. But that process is very, very slow.
Well, and to your point, it's because a lot of those folks have year-long leases. So if I have a lease and I'm 4 months in with 8 months to go, I'm not spending my extra time looking at the neighborhood complexes to see if their rent's lower, because I'm not going to break my lease.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying rents don't react. They do. But the other thing, too, that can, if you're strategic about it, if you have picked a rental unit that is in the middle of the price point, you've got lots of people who are more affluent above you. As they become less affluent, they actually bring demand into your area. And even though everybody's becoming less affluent due to inflation and lower real wages, you actually have more people that are competing for the more affordable properties. Well, the rising tide will lift all boats, and people from underneath will push up in good times. In bad times, people from on top will push down in the rental class, and people who were formerly owners will push over into the higher up in the rental class. So you have to look at that on a local level. We'd say all the time, you listen to these people in the conferences and they try to treat real estate like an asset class. It's not an asset class. So you really have to know the neighborhood. But the principles by which they do the analysis are valid. Their analysis doesn't work because there's no such thing as an average home or average rent in a national level. It's going to be whatever's going on in a specific neighborhood or a specific metro at best.
Well, and big picture is, and we certainly heard this from our friend Danielle, is that we're behind. America needs more houses. We are behind in construction. Now, she actually gave us a nice shout out from the stage because she said most people in real estate don't understand what I'm about to tell you. The real estate guys do, but most people don't. And what she was talking about was the need for additional housing units and the information people use to come to that conclusion. So it varies a ton. The National Association of Realtors has a much different number than the National Association of Home Builders, who has a different number than the folks at the big construction warehouse companies, right? And all of that is because they use different metrics. And not to get in the weeds on it, you can probably go back and listen to the last interview we did with Danielle DiMartino Booth, and she explains it. But because it's not just about population growth. Most of the macro folks that are looking at this, it's about population growth and household formation. She adds the nuance about who those people are and are their wages going up to where they can afford, and that plays into it. But whether you think that number is, and Danielle's probably in the low side, 700,000, or you think it's Lawrence Yune's number of 6 million, our friend John Burns thinks it's about 2.5 million. We are underbuilt as a nation. We need more rental housing. And the challenge is when interest rates go up, investors have less incentive to put capital to work in that regard. And so we continue to have pent-up demand.
Well, and even worse, you have builders, and the home builder sentiment is way down right now, and they have a very uncertain landscape. They see rising interest rates, which is not only their cost of capital, but it inhibits the ability for the buyers, the home buyers, to purchase their finished product. So that's a concern. You've got the impact primarily driven by energy, but the overall impact in commodities, the building materials, and of course you have the issues in the labor market. You have all of these things piling up to give people a very uncertain landscape with respect to, if I go to build this and budget it for today, when I get to the end of this build cycle a year from now and I bring this inventory to market, am I going to be able to make a profit based on the direction of the pricing, based on the direction of interest rates, based on the health of the economy? And so because of that, they're deferring. They're not starting projects. They're not doing as much. They're hedging their bets. We just talked to a developer who's divesting himself of some of his land and decided, hey, I'm not going to build it. And we've got other people that are changing the cycle through which they build. So they're not as aggressive in creating inventory because they're not as confident on the back end that there's going to be buyers or that they can hold the line. They've been hurt because they write a contract. And of course, it's got a price escalation clause for this exact reason. But nobody ever wants to do this. Like when you put together a private placement for a syndication, it's got a cash call provision, but nobody wants to do a cash call. Nobody wants to run short. Nobody wants to miss projections.
Right.
But when you go out there and say, hey, I can build the house for X, and the customer gets in contract to buy it for X, you got two things going on. You go to deliver the product. You're like, I can't build it for that. I didn't have all the materials on hand. I didn't have the labor all prepaid. So now all of a sudden I find out I can't build it. And then the buyer comes in and goes, hey, I thought I could afford it, but now with interest rates where they're at and inflation where it's at, I can't afford to buy it. And that combination has got a lot of builders going, I think I'm going to slow down. And at the same time, to your point, Robert, the population growth, whether it's, the lower estimate or the higher estimate, it doesn't matter. It's there. And that's still coming. The only nuance that I would add is that when you look at the number of housing units we're going to need and population growth we're going to need, again, the macro people throw all that in a blender. The reality is some markets are going to be completely overbuilt. You're going to have population leaving for a variety of factors that, we've talked about. It's no secret California, Illinois, and New York are hemorrhaging people. Places like Arizona, Texas, and Florida are growing in population for whatever reasons. And you should study the differences between them and find out what those reasons are, because then you can take a look at where those factors are going to be present and go, under certain circumstances, people will move from certain areas to other areas. And if you put yourself on the front end of that, so then you dive into those specific markets where people are actually coming because you're going to be the beneficiary of the population growth. And then you take a look at all these macro factors, which are universal, right? The cost of labor, the cost of interest rates. These things are universal. So they're happening in all markets, but the markets can react to them differently. Of course, labor, wages, real wages, and people's ability to have jobs and afford house payments, that's very local. So you have to study the local employment market, the local job creation, tax environment, and cost of living environment and wages, and see, will people be able to afford whatever product you're considering investing in a specific market? And because there's inefficiencies in real estate, which is why we love it, you can still find pockets of opportunity, but you got to have good boots on the ground teams who are in the weeds in those markets and can tell you exactly what's going on and where it's happening.
So at the beginning of this year, when you set your goals for how much real estate you wanted to own, and now you're ready to buy your first property or your next property, what do high interest rates really mean to you? That's what we'll talk about when we come back, and we'll play real estate trivia next. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Real estate investment advice right in your mailbox. Sign up for the free Real Estate Guys newsletter at realestateguysradio.com.
Are you achieving everything you want in life? What if there was a time-tested way for you to get everything you've ever dreamed of? The most successful people in life set goals and keep themselves accountable. But how? The good news is that it's not rocket science. You too can learn the skills and unleash the motivation that will create success in your life. And now is the time. Hi, this is Robert Helms, and I'd like to personally invite you to attend Create Your Future, the 2023 Goals Retreat, January 6th through 8th in beautiful Lake Las Vegas, Nevada. This unique weekend event has been called phenomenal, inspirational, and life-changing by the thousands of people that have attended. Hear from some of them and find out more at realestateguysradio.com under events, or call 888-489-7723, extension 18. Get your life back on track, physically, spiritually, and financially. Attend the 2023 Goals Retreat on the first weekend of the new year. Click events at realestateguysradio.com to register. This is no dress rehearsal. Live the life you were meant to. Visit realestateguysradio.com or call 888-489-7723, extension 18 today.
Hey, ever wished you could go back in time and do some tax planning? Now you can, just like Marty McFly. Lucky for you, a brand new federal law just made this possible with an EQRP to get tax deductions and reduce your taxable income from last year, so you can use that tax savings to invest in real estate, Bitcoin, gold, even your own business. Whether you're a full-time investor, doctor, government employee, even if you have 5 or 50 employees, the EQRP works and is your secret weapon, and now it's retroactive. Hey, I'm Damian Lupo, and we have your solution. By the way, if you got bad advice and used an IRA for an apartment syndication, you are sitting on a U-bit time bomb. But don't worry, there's a solution, the EQRP. The EQRP company is ready to help you get control of your money, kill U-bit, and help you pay way less taxes. Want to learn more about this strategy? Send an email to eqrp@realestateguysradio.com for my special EQRP report. Paying tax or letting Wall Street suck you dry is dumb. Your first step is freeing your retirement money by sending an email to eqrp@realestateguysradio.com today.
Hi, I'm Aaron Katusa, the chairman at Katusa Research. You're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. If you want to get more out of life and you're not crystal clear about how to do that, you owe it to yourself to come out to Create Your Future, the 2023 Goals Retreat. It happens the first weekend of January in Lake Las Vegas, Nevada. Get all the details at goalsretreat.com. That's goalsretreat.com. We're talking today about the increase in interest rates and what that means for real estate investors. We've got some more thoughts, but first, let's play real estate trivia. That's your chance to win a prize by knowing today's real estate trivia question, which has something to do with real estate, of course. When you hear the question and think you might know the answer, send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Give us your name, your mailing address, and the answer to the question. The first person that gets it right gets an awesome book called Persistence, Pivots, and Game Changers, Turning Challenges into Opportunities. That can be yours if you know today's real estate trivia question. Last time around, it was clues in the news, and we asked you this. Name the 2 U.S. states that have birth rates higher than the natural replacement rate. Yeah, most states actually keep in line with the natural replacement rate of our species, but 2 of the United States have much higher birth rates. Those are Utah and North Dakota. Speaking of U.S. states, here's our real estate trivia question for this week. Which U.S. state has the highest median home price? Of all the fabulous states in the United States of America, which one is the most expensive, has the highest median home price? If you know, just want to take a guess, or maybe you live there, send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Give us your name, the answer to the question, and your mailing address. The first person that gets it right gets persistence, pivots, and game changers. That's today's real estate trivia question. We're talking today about the elephant in the room. Inflation is crazy and interest rates are going up. And specifically, I think, Russ, as a financial strategist, you made this point over the weekend in a couple of presentations, and we've talked about it at least once on the show, but it's so important right now to think about. Folks that have invested for many, many years, like us, think of this differently than people that have only been investing in the last couple of years. If all you ever have known is interest rates at 2, 3, 4, and 5%, then you haven't seen the big picture. I remember my dad, the godfather of real estate, had invested in 8 different decades, and he felt if your interest rate had a single digit, you're good. Like double digit, I got to think about it. Single digit, take it. But it's hard to get your mind around that when all you've seen is low rates. And you can look at the charts and see that we have had abnormally low rates in the last several years compared to the dawn of time. So the big question is, I wanted to buy a property 3 months ago. I was this close. I didn't, or I was thinking about refinancing a property and I didn't. Now interest rates are 6.5%, 7.5%. Russ, what is someone to do?
Well, I think that as investors, we look at our cost, our input costs, our cost of capital, and we ask ourselves if whatever we're buying is going to cover that and make us a profit. It doesn't really matter what the numbers are. If I can borrow at 12, my first rental property was 12.5. If I can borrow at 12 and earn 16, well, maybe I want to do that. And if I feel like, hey, interest rates may come down, then somewhere down the road, I'm going to own the property. When rates come down, the inverse in terms of the effect on pricing is going to happen. In other words, the cheaper money is going to inflate the price of the property, and I own the property, so equity will happen to me, and I can refinance the property. So what I do is I think as a strategist, if you've ever played chess, which is a strategy game, every move, you have to ask yourself, what if? If I make this move, then what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this other thing happens? And you think it through. So if I am a brand new first-time home buyer, I'm out there and I'm thinking I want to buy a home. And I think, I don't know. I can see the prices coming down. Maybe I want to wait, but they're coming down because mortgages are going up. So you say, well, if I wait for the price to come down, the thing causing it is going to make it less affordable. So affordable is a ratio between the price and the interest rate. As they raise the rates, the prices are coming down. That's the way it works. It's just like if cap rates are going up in a market, and of course, nobody sets a cap rate. It's determined by the price that people are willing to pay. And in an environment like this, people are willing to pay less because they've got to cover the cost of capital, and that's going up. Okay. My choices are, if I buy a home today at today's price at 7%, and the cash flow makes sense for me based on my income and expenses, and I can afford it, 10 years from now, am I going to be happy that I own the property? Well, historically, even if you would have bought at the peak in 2007, by 2017, and this is the worst real estate crash we ever had, you were back to even, and then from there, it was game on. Okay. I think you need to be prepared, and anytime you buy a property in a market like this, you need to be prepared to hang on for 10 years and not be speculating on things that are largely out of your control. But if you get the 7% mortgage today and rates go up, you're going to be happy that you have the 7% mortgage. Now, somebody might say, yeah, but the price of the property would go down. Yes, but so would your ability to buy it.
And there's an excellent chance that you have a 1 or 2 year lease, and so your cash flow is the same regardless of what the value of the property does in the interim.
Well, yeah, and if I'm talking about being a homeowner, but if you're a landlord and you're looking at rentals, yeah, I mean, more people are going to come into the rental pool as interest rates go up because they can't afford to buy. But just as a homeowner, so if I'm a homeowner and I get the mortgage, mortgage and I can afford the mortgage and I want to be in the property for a minimum of 10 years, to my way of thinking, it's like, okay, I probably want to do that because if interest rates go up, I'm going to be happy that I have a 7% loan. In hindsight, that'll be a cheap loan and I'll be glad I have it. And it actually can become an asset because when you want to exit the property, the person doesn't have to get a new loan. They actually you can wrap or they can take over your loan. And so we won't get into the weeds on that. But the era of creative financing was really born the last time interest rates spiked way up. And that may come back again. And there's going to be some real opportunities in the marketplace if that happens. Now, on the other hand, if the interest rate were to go down, you buy at 7%, you get the property and the interest rate will go down, you're going to be really, really happy. Why? Because you are going to see probably equity go up as the interest rate goes down. The ability for more people to bid up on the property or comparable properties is going to go up. So you'll get equity, but you'll also be able to refinance a loan and lower your overall cost. That would be a great scenario. So if you say, gosh, interest rates are kind of high. Well, if you think they're kind of high in the cycle, then great, get in when they're high and then take advantage of it so when they go down. Really, maybe the least interesting environment is if they stay the same. If they stay the same and you've penciled it to where it makes sense for you, then you're going to pay down the loan over time and modest inflation, is going to happen because it's baked into the cake. The Fed says right on their website, they're committed to at least 2% inflation.
And they are overachievers lately.
So then you say to yourself, well, what if I don't buy the property? Well, if you don't buy the property, then the probability is your rent is going to go up. You're not going to get any tax breaks. You're not going to get any amortization or pay down of loan. You're not going to enjoy the pride of ownership, if you will, the ability to be the king of your own castle, if you will. You're certainly not going to have any equity happen to you over the long haul, really. So to me, if you can afford it and the numbers make sense and you find a property you want as a homeowner, go ahead. Now, if you're an investor, it's basically the same thing. You just have to really underwrite the market and the ability of the demand for the rents to be able to cover. But if you feel good about it, the same logic applies. The people who are hurting right now, who get scared, are the people who already own properties, who have a mental picture that, hey, my property is worth X and I have this much equity and I've turned in my financials and done my balance sheet. Now, when I look around at other properties similar, I can see that my equity is eroding. And this is why we say all the time, unrealized gains aren't really real. They're not. It's just air. And when your asset value, like real estate, is heavily dependent upon easy money, interest rates and healthy credit markets, then you have to understand that can turn on you very quickly. It happened in 2008. It's happening now. And the worst may not be over yet. But that doesn't mean that you sit the market out. It just means you have to be smarter about your cash flow, which you should always be smart about your cash flow, and make sure that you're ready to play a longer game because you may have to ride it out on that property for 10 years. But there's some benefits along the way. So, it still makes sense to think about doing it. So again, I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm just saying that interest rates are interesting, right? But it's really what kind of a profit can you make on the capital? And real estate is a long game. Tell me about the market. Tell me about the demographic you serve. Tell me about the team running it. And if all of those things check off to be solid, I don't care what the interest rate is. If the cash flow pencils, I can hang on to it. And if we end up having what they call a Fed pivot, and everybody says, oh my gosh, we crashed the economy and we got to reflate everything like we did in 2008. Well, if you look at what happened post 2008 to real estate prices and most asset prices is they pumped a bunch of cheap money back in. The bigger concern was the weakness of the dollar. It took more dollars to buy the same thing. Of course, if you own real estate, then that means equity happens. So we're not saying this is, sit out and wait for the bottom, unless you're cash. If you're sitting on gobs of cash, and you're just sitting liquid and you're hoping this whole thing falls apart and you can go buy, quality properties in nice markets for 50 cents, 40 cents on the dollar, well, there could be an argument made for that. But if you're not a person out there who's sitting on that kind of cash and you've got to find a way to get in the game, I would say use leverage while it's still available, but just be smart about it.
There's a story in our book we call Bob's Big Boo-Boo, which is a story of my dad buying an apartment building way, way back and then selling it 25 years later for a nice big profit. And we re-engineered that to say, what if over that 25 years, only twice did he sell the property, take the money forward, do a 1031 tax deferred exchange in another property. And twice over 25 years, and the amount of difference it made was unbelievable.
It 10x'd.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually went through when we wanted to refine this and took into consideration, of course, you created the spreadsheet, what the interest rates were at the time, all that stuff, so we could really calculate over a 25-year period. But it brought up another thing. Of course, he had bought other properties during that time. And there was nowhere in my dad's 50 plus years of real estate that we had records and numbers on that it would have made sense for him to sit out. Not when rates were 18%, not when rates were 10%, not when rates were, like when you bought your first property, Russ, 12.5%. And so if you go back and you talk to real estate guys, people that have been doing this a long time, and you say, now, which were the 2 or 3 years that you should have completely sat on your hands, not bought any more real estate and just stopped? It's almost impossible to figure it out. Market timing is hard in every single asset class. But in real estate, Mark Twain said, don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. Time will heal all wounds. Now, it's hard if you're a flipper. If you're flipping a property right now, George Gammon was just telling a story about a friend of his who is really good at this, been flipping property for a profit for a long time, and just took a $70,000 loss on a flip. Well, that's because short term, it's dicey. Long term, though, just go out and do the research. Find a 10-year period in the markets that you like to invest in where you would have lost money if you had bought in year 1 and sold in year 11. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. More when we come back. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Need help with your real estate investment portfolio? Check out the resources page at realestateguysradio.com.
Hey, it's Robert Helms. Thanks so much for listening to the show today. I want to personally invite you to come see an amazing real estate market that combines excellent cash flow, offshore diversification, and what we affectionately call lifestyle investing. Come join me from December 9th to 12th in the beautiful country of Belize. The Real Estate Guys have been bringing investors to Belize for more than 16 years now, and our discovery trip is designed to show you the market like nobody else can. Sure, Belize is breathtakingly beautiful. The people are wonderful, and wait till you taste the food. But the real opportunity is the real estate investment potential. There's all types of opportunity in Belize when it comes to real estate investing, including both long and short-term rentals, commercial and retail triple net properties, business opportunities, land acquisition, development, agriculture, and more. And as the only country in Latin America with English as its official language, it's easy to understand the law. Property rights are strong, and contracts are in English. And at Ambergris Caye, a unique situation exists where demand for rentals continues to outstrip supply, creating a compelling environment for investors. So come see for yourself. Join me December 9th to 12th in Ambergris Caye, Belize, as we study the market, learn about the sustainable drivers, and tour lots of beautiful real estate. And like all of our field trips, there are no properties for sale during the weekend. Rather, you'll meet lots of local providers that will help educate you about the market so that you can follow up with them after the trip if the market's interesting to you. But that ball's in your court. You'll receive their contact details, but they won't receive yours unless you give it to them. You've heard about Belize and the Real Estate Guys for all these years. Now come see what all the excitement is about. Plus, we'll have lots of time over meals and activities to talk about all things real estate. To get the details, go to the website at realestateguysradio.com and click on events where you'll find the Belize Discovery Trips. Once you register, you'll get information about our group hotel rates as well as travel details. So join me in Belize December 9th to 12th. It's a beautiful country with lots of amazing possibilities, and the only thing missing is you. Go to realestateguysradio.com under events, and I look forward to seeing you in beautiful Belize.
Hey, it's Kyle Wilson, Jim Rohn's 18-year business partner, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
And welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you've ever wanted to do bigger deals using other people's money, or if you want to passively invest alongside folks that are doing awesome stuff, well then come on out to the Secrets of Successful Syndication. Twice a year we do a 2-day course on aggregating capital to do bigger deals and go bigger faster. It happens in March in Dallas, Texas. Get all the details on the website at realestateguysradio.com under events, where you'll also see a list of the events that we do and other people's events that we're invited to. We're talking about the elephant in the room. Interest rates are crazy high, and that's awful. What do you do about it? Well, as Russ said, you may want to consider buying a property and refinancing when the rates go down. If they do, keep in mind that's 1 to 4 unit properties. Most commercial properties, apartment buildings, and those kinds of things, you aren't going to be able to just simply refi if the rates go down. But an interesting thing happens in the apartment space. So let's say I get in today and I have to pay more for an apartment loan. Well, the rent tends to stay more stable in those types of properties. If I'm renting a single family home in a neighborhood where there's lots of owners and not that many renters, then it's hard to find adequate comps. In a 200 or 300 unit apartment building, the comps are simple. And if today's tenant doesn't want to stay, tomorrow's tenant might. To your point earlier, Russ, if things get tight, people move down a little bit, or people that were owning are renting. So we see more stability in the rent rates of those kinds of properties. Another thing to consider would be commercial properties where many leases are 5, 10, or 20 years. If I have a 20-year lease from a credit-rated tenant, then I have less concern over what's happening in the meantime. We often say that you get to negotiate the price of the property one time, but you generally can negotiate the financing multiple times if need be, even on those longer term assets.
Yeah, I think that the rule in investing is to avoid the trap of borrowing short and investing long. When you're buying real estate, these are typically 30-year mortgages in residential 1 to 4. And so it's a safer place to play from a stability of financing because you can get really, really great financing. You can't play the game really, really big that way. You're going to move up to apartments or some other form of real estate. But if you're just getting started, it can be great. The challenge is when you start making 10 and 15 and 20-year investments and you have to use financing that's only 10 or 15 years long, you run the risk that you are forced to refinance when credit markets aren't healthy, when interest rates aren't favorable, or the pricing isn't right. That's something to be careful of, especially with properties where you're having to use shorter term financing as a secondary component. And so depending on what level you're playing at, you just have to be aware of that. But again, the other thing is banks aren't stupid, and they're also underwriting these things, and they all can see what's coming. I think the bigger concern that people really need to be prepared for is if there's a disruption in the banking and credit system. In other words, if we have a repeat of 2008, many of the factors that caused 2008, which was bond values collapsing and leveraged bond portfolios creating cash calls, meaning these margin loans. In fact, somebody referred a movie to us called Margin Call. I haven't watched it yet, but I want to watch it. And it was really about what happened in 2008. So you've got these financial institutions that are holding all these bonds on their balance sheet, and they've leveraged them the same way we leverage a piece of real estate on our balance sheet. We borrow against it. The problem is if the value of the property goes down, we don't get a call that says, oh, you need to restore the ratio. If I bought a $100,000 property with a $50,000 loan and the price drops to $80,000, I don't have to pay the loan down to $40,000. So I can still be at a 50% loan to value.
Like you would with a stock portfolio on margin, those same exact numbers. I buy $100,000 worth of stock on margin with $50,000 in cash. If the price goes down, I do get that phone call, that margin call.
Right. And that's my point. And the same thing is true with the bond markets. And so the challenge is if you have to sell the bonds and you take the hit and it shows up on your balance sheet because it's a realized loss, you can't hold the thing on your balance sheet at book value. You're going to have to take it at what you actually sold it at. And so for these highly leveraged institutions, this is what happened to the pension system in England recently, where the Bank of England had to step in and put in a bottom for them. Is these leveraged plays were unraveling because of rising interest rates. And this is, talk about an elephant in the room. This is the thing that's going on in the financial system that a lot of people aren't aware of, can't see, but you're seeing hints of it. And if we end up in a situation where the credit markets seize and people stop making loans for a period of time, during that period of time, asset values will crash. There will be a lot of distressed people in the market. And if you're prepared for that with cash or a network of investors that have cash or a portion of cash, and you can aggregate that cash through a syndication and go pick up bargains, that could be fantastic. In fact, we created our syndication training in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis because we looked at what was going on in the financial markets and said, gosh, these credit markets are messed up. It's going to take a while before the pipeline of money back into the jump house, if you will, is going to get repaired. And so during that period of time, there's going to be a real opportunity for private capital. So if we run around and find high net worth people that are looking to pick up bargains on Main Street, and our value add is we have the network, we have those deals, we'll put them together. You bring the capital, we'll bring the deal and the hustle. We get a piece of the action and some fees. They get most of the profit. It's a win-win for everybody. And the reason it's possible is because the credit market's broke. So when you watch the news and you listen to shows like this and you hear people talking about, rising interest rates and falling prices and lower nominal wages and raging inflation and weak consumer and home builder sentiment is down, that doesn't mean bad. It's neither good nor bad. It just is what it is. It's changed. The bad is if you try to play the new game the old way. If you think that it's going to be the way it was, that was the mistake I made. I thought that there would continue to be credit available. And so if prices went down, I'd be able to go get loans at the lower price. So if you're sitting on the sideline and you don't get in a market when you need leverage to get in, to our earlier point, then the only thing that's going to happen is you're going to be left out. You're going to see the bargains and you won't be able to buy them. So if you're the type of person that is just getting started and you have access to finance, you can find a deal that makes sense, I would do that. That's just me. I'm not telling you what to do, but I think that makes sense because I think no matter what happens, you're going to be glad that you have it 10 years from now. And if you're the kind of person that wants to kind of go a little bit bigger and you say, gosh, if this thing really blows up for a little while, I would really like to be in a position to go bargain shopping. I promise you, there's a lot of people pretty discouraged with the stock market right now that are looking for an alternative. So you ought to think about coming out to our Secrets of Successful Syndication in March and learning how to do it, because we got a lot of people doing it. They're raising tons of money. I think there's going to be an even bigger opportunity. It's just every time I think the opportunity in syndication is gotten as good as it can be, it seems to get better. So if you're interested in that, just send an email to syndication, SYNDICATION, syndication at realestateguysradio.com. We'll get you all the details.
Now, a couple more things. One is that when things tighten up like this in terms of financing and credit markets, and you're a real estate investor, you have to pay extra, super diligent attention to two things. Market selection. When prices are just going up everywhere like they've done the last couple of years, you could have bought anywhere in almost any country and the price would have gone up 10, 20, 30%. Doesn't take any special skill to do that. But when it's tight, you want to really hone in on the right markets that have the right types of properties with the right tenant profiles and all of the right metrics. So that's number one. And the second thing is property management. It's always important to have a great property manager. It's more important going into a downturn, if we have one, however long that is, than ever before. So you have to be diligent and prudent, and obviously underwriting was the thing that Russ talked about. You've got to be solid there. But I think on the upside, there's another nuance to this that, again, nobody talks about. We were talking back in the green room at the New Orleans Investment Conference about hardly anyone ever thinks about the time value of money. And the fact that they're laughing about paying $5.50 for a cup of coffee that when this conference started was 10 cents. So let's say that you get into debt at 7%. First of all, check with your CPA. That's tax deductible, that payment, kind of no matter what. But the other thing that happens is every day, every dollar is worth less. And when you borrow, you short the dollar. Meaning that if I'm going to borrow $100,000 today and pay it off in chunks over the next 30 years, those last few years, I'm paying with cups of coffee. I'm paying with tiny amounts of real money. And so it's something you got to spend your time thinking about. It's not for today, it's for tomorrow, but it's why our friend Robert Kiyosaki loves debt. He loves real estate, but he loves real estate because he can get debt on it. And the more debt, the better. And right now, you can get into a lot of debt. So it's worth thinking about. Interest rates are part of the price we pay. So it could be that it no longer makes sense to buy that house or that next rental property. But don't let the overhype of the media and the pundits steer you in the wrong direction. Very rarely do people that sit it out win. There's been people since 2014 who have thought the stock market and the real estate market are headed back down, and they've sat out the market and they've sat in cash. And that cash has gone down in value every single year, the last year especially. So while we want to have cash when there's a buying opportunity, when stuff's on sale, what's way better is to have a whole bunch of investors ready to give that cash to you to deploy. Hey, next week, it is our annual edition of Halloween Horror Stories. Things that go desperately, terribly wrong, and the great lessons that you can learn. You're going to love it. Oh my gosh, we've got some great stories. And then in November, look for an interview we did with a 15-year-old kid that owns more than 40 units. Until then, go out and make some equity happen.
This episode of the Real Estate Guys radio show is brought to you by Paradigm Life. Powerful cash management strategies using life insurance. Learn more at beyourbank.com. Mid-South Home Buyers. Low-cost, turnkey cash flow properties in Memphis, Tennessee. Corporate Direct. Asset protection strategies for real estate investors. From attorney and rich dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Find these and other great companies under the Resources tab at realestateguysradio.com. To learn how you can expose your product or service to the Real Estate Guys audience, call 888-489-7723 extension 4. That's 888-489-7723 extension 4. Or use the feedback page at realestateguysradio.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week right here on the Real Estate Guys Radio Show.